Hi, everyone coming in. Just going to give it a few seconds while everybody gets in the room here before we get started. Okay. It's looking like we're pretty good. I think almost everybody's in. We may have a few late arrivals, but let's just get going. Good morning, everyone. For those of you where it is morning, good afternoon, good evening for wherever else you may be calling in from. My name is Clay Pruitt. I am the ShortFest Forum producer. I am extremely thrilled to be able to put on the forum programming this year, despite the circumstances. It's kind of the silver lining that I've discovered in this whole process is that many of the attendees here, many of the filmmakers would not have been able to attend the in-person festival. So this year, just happy that they can have access from all around the world to this incredible lineup of people to give their expertise and guidance to you, such as this incredible panel we have here today, discussing the anatomy of a first feature. I will be moderating today as sort of a last minute change, so bear with me. But there will come a time when we get to Q&As. For any attendees, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those when the time comes. Before I get started, I want to say on behalf of the festival, we want to acknowledge the pain and anger we're all feeling right now, not just about the most recent events we've witnessed, but also the long-standing history of injustice and inequality. We stand with Black Lives Matter, and we are committed to working together to move our community, our country, and the world closer to unity, understanding, and inclusivity. I do want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded for future use. And to kick things off, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves and just say a little bit about who they are. Let's start with Andrew Carlberg.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew. I'm a film, television, and theater producer based in Los Angeles. Some of my credits include the Neil LaBute feature Some Girls, Jennifer Morrison's directorial debut Sundogs, and the Oscar-winning short Skin.
Let's go to Craig Johnson.
Hi, I'm Craig Johnson. I'm writer-director, film and television. I've made 4 features, including The Skeleton Twins, Alex Strangelove, Wilson, and my first feature, a movie called True Adolescence. And I'm happy to be here.
Julia?
Hi, my name is Julia. I am originally from Italy. Now I live and work in LA. I'm a producer. And when I was thinking about this panel, I realized that I'm like a first feature producer, actually, because we've made 3 first features in a row. So that's good, I guess, for the circumstances. I produced a movie called Spa Night by Andrew Ahn, which was his debut feature, and then a movie called Columbus by Kogonada, and then just wrapped before the lockdown, another feature in Greece. Yeah, we have some new projects in the works and trying to figure out what's gonna happen of us all after everything.
Absolutely. And Nick?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Ogioni. I am an agent at Creative Arts Agency. I've been there now for 10 years. And my specialty is film finance, packaging, and sales. So how I basically help within the confines of CAA, help producers and filmmakers find the right ingredients to sort of make up the package. And then also help find a home and find your movie some distribution, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, he's a very important component of this whole process, and we'll dive into that some more. I want to start, since the bulk of our audience, I believe, are the directors themselves of the many shorts that we have playing in the festival. I want to start with you, Craig, in terms of just getting a sense from you what was most daunting, and also what ended up being the biggest saving grace for you when it came time to make your first feature.
Sure. I mean, that's an easy question. Money. I hope everyone who's watching this is nodding their heads right now, because boy, that's the real bugaboo for all of this. If you are not independently wealthy, if you are not best friends with Scarlett Johansson, how do you get money to make your movie? There is not one answer to this. I think the best thing to do is to just gather as many anecdotal stories from directors and producers, and maybe start to see if there's some themes that emerge. Because all I can do is sort of relay kind of my first experience making my first feature, which was 1,000 years ago in 2007. So while times have changed a little bit, mostly in terms of distribution, actually, I think the financing a feature is still kind of the same thing, which is you have to connect yourself to money somehow. How do you do that if you don't know rich people, if you aren't independently wealthy yourself? Most of us are not. The biggest piece of the puzzle for me was finding the right producer. I can't stress that enough. I went to NYU Graduate Film School. I had made some short films. None of them set the world on fire. They weren't that great, to be honest. They were fine. I never got into the Palm Springs ShortFest, I'll say that, with them, and I tried. But I was always writing features. I was always knew how to kind of put together a feature, and I had a stack of scripts, and I had this script that I figured was small enough, doable enough. Let's try to put it together. I did a reading of that script at NYU, which went well, just a table read with actors and an audience, got some feedback. And the dean of the school said, "This is great, we should try to do this." Technically, my first feature was my thesis film for film school. It's kind of where this is ending up. But for the producer, I connected with a fellow student, someone who was graduating from the producing department at NYU. So I didn't have an experienced producer. I connected with somebody who was doing his first feature as well. But he was so passionate about it. He was just as passionate as me about the creative material and about getting this film off the ground. And I think that is mission critical. Finding a producer who's just as passionate about it, about the creative project as you are. And then it's on you to collaborate with that person and give them, the leeway to help you with this. The money part, it's a mixture of turning over every rock you can find. If that means knocking on the door of your second cousin who worked in Silicon Valley for a while and maybe has some, you should do that. The version of Kickstarter. But most of us will need some larger chunks of money, and that is just a little bit of a treasure map search. For me personally, the producer I had literally had an uncle who knew a guy in Silicon Valley who was a film fan and made a lot of money. One of these retire at 35-year-old guy. Angel investors means incredibly wealthy people who believed in my producer, didn't know me at all, read the script, liked it, but knew the producer, believed in him and sort of wanted to help an enterprising youngster out. And so I'll let somebody else talk now. I've been blah, blah, blahing. But the short of all of this is I think the person who's going to finance your first feature is going to be someone who believes in you personally, who knows you personally, because you don't have a lot to, you know, you'll have some short films, but they'll be rolling the dice. So they'll really, it needs to be somebody who believes in you personally.
That's great. I want to kick it to the two producers here, Andrew and Julia. So going off of what Craig is saying, you know, the importance of finding a really strong producer as a first-time feature director. On the flip side of that, there's a lot of risk involved in that process from a producer's perspective. You know, from taking a chance on a first-time feature director. So can you both talk a little bit about your process of evaluating, you know, if this is a director that you want to get behind, what does that that process look like? And then how do you go about finding financing for somebody who's quote unquote unproven? Either of you.
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked with both first-time feature directors and I guess we'll use the term veteran directors for the other phrase. I've worked with people that, and I've worked with people who have done their first feature, and then I've worked with them on their second feature as well. So I mean, I think that like, I do think having a short under your belt or two is a good way to test the waters for sure. And I like doing shorts with people because it gives you a chance to see how you communicate with them and what their style is. In terms of actually getting the financing, and I'm sure Nick will have opinions on this too, but I think that like, I guess if you had a huge splashy feature in recent time, you know, it might be easier to get the financing for somebody. But if it's a first-time feature director or someone that had a handful of features that, while good, have just existed, I don't know if that necessarily makes the financing process, you know, easier. You're still putting it together from the beginning, and you're still looking at what the whole package looks like and the genre of the film and what the cast looks like. So, I mean, my tactic for fundraising unless you have like a star director, doesn't really change whether it's a first-time director or a fourth-time director. You know, it's still a matter of like, how is this material going to resonate? What is the whole package of the film look like, and how do we ultimately see it performing?
I think going, I guess, back to your question about sort of how we decide to work with someone as producers, it's very much instinct based for me. I think the first thing that I trust is the response to the story. Like the log line that someone would put in an email or that would tell you when you first meet quickly. It's a very instinctive response to that, of like something that excites me because I had not thought about it. Something that excites me because it's a story that I think is urgent and needs to be happening right now. Like that, I mean, you know, you all probably have the same thing. It's like that gut feeling when you hear something and you're like, oh wow, yes, this needs to happen somehow. So that's the first step. So I think that I don't know, when I teach, I get a lot of resistance from students about what is your story in a nutshell. But I think that is really important, not just, you know, in the bigger scheme of things of like pitching, is because that's what people respond to in the first place. Like when you get an email, you read, this is a movie about, and being able to articulate what it's about is hugely important, because that's the first thing people respond to. And then we go down the email, and then you go to the attachment, and then you go to see the short films, and then you know, do all of that work. But if that nutshell is not doesn't hook you, and it's not going to hook everybody, right? Like what I respond to is probably different from what like Andrew responds to, but I think being able to know what movie to boil down your movie to something that's tight and that represents the kind of movie you want to make. So that's the first step. And then the second step for me is always figuring out if the director and I are trying to make the same movie. There are scripts I read that I loved, and then I met, and one person was thinking Haneke, the other one was thinking romantic comedy. So that was definitely a split. And I think that's
a Haneke romantic comedy. Come on.
Right? I was trying to push that, but then they just went for the romantic comedy. But I think it's a good thing for directors too. I mean, that is a two-way checking in with each other. Like if a producer, as cool as they may be or as much access they may have to money, if they're not making the same movie you're making, that's gonna constantly come up. That's gonna come up every step of the way, with casting, with everything. So those are the two main things in sort of starting a relationship with a director. And then I think, especially for first-time directors, is so much of the making of the movie is gonna rely on their passion for this. So if they are able to articulate and express and convey why they need to make this movie and otherwise their life is over, then I think then you have something that it's contagious, first of all, and you have something that you can use towards actually getting money and everything you'll need.
Yeah, just to step in there, I'll say, from a CA perspective, obviously that's always like the number one question is, hey, Nick, find me the money. And I think that like the points that they've all given are really, especially for a first time feature, are really smart. Obviously having a strong producer is paramount. And I think also just talking about Craig's way of just gathering information of how there's no one way to do it right. Every single film has been financed a completely different way than the other one. And so each one is sort of its own unique baby in that sense. But I mean, what I can say is that, and this is sort of an abstract term, so just bear with me here, but you have to be able to not only communicate your story, but bring a sense of what, we kind of call momentum, right? It's like all about momentum. And however you manufacture that momentum is completely up to you. That could be doing a short film, going to Sundance, and then having a script that's sort of thematically the same, so you can show, hey, here's my calling card, and now I'm going to make a movie that's similar like this. I got my career at William Morris, and I worked with this agent whose job really was to go to Sundance, find the best shorts, sign them, and then he would help put those movies together. And so that's sort of where I started my career. And so that kind of got me this window into love of independent cinema because of that. But like that could be so many different ways. Even your producer who you work with could be the source of that momentum. Your passion could be that momentum. There's so many different ways to define it. But I think just having tangible things that you can do, benchmarks, whether that's making the short or finishing the feature screenplay or finding that producer, having those benchmarks to sort of climb the ladder and get to the next step is really going to be your journey. And obviously, I think where a lot of people get hung up is that, when you're at CAA, you're working with world-class actors, writers, and directors. The money, I wouldn't say comes easier, but there's much more of a business-like approach to it. You get Bruce Willis with a gun, and it's going to be worth $10 million. It's like buying and selling a house. It's just whether the pieces. I know that sounds very, like just capitalist in the sense of how we put these things together, but it's like it's a different level as opposed to where you guys are at making your first film. It really does. Passion and motivation and momentum goes a long way. And we can dive down into those points a little bit further, but it is these are terms and sort of ideas that I think are really important. And it's not like you go to CAA and CAA is going to find you the money for the first film. That's not how it works. There is a bit of a journey and a pilgrimage, frankly, to get that first film done.
Yeah. Actually, going off of that, can you, anybody can jump in here. I think there's kind of often a thing that either first-time filmmakers hear or they somehow end up believing that they need to, in order to get their first feature off the ground, they need to have some insanely commercial element to their film to get the financing secured, like whether that's a name talent or maybe it's an incredibly topical storyline. Can anybody can speak to this? Do you feel like that's true in terms of feasibility and ease of finding the financing, or what advice would you give to filmmakers that are feeling that way?
I think, well, something that I think is really important for any producer, but also any director at any stage of their career, but I think it's especially true and especially hard on your first feature. I do think you need to be very aware of where your movie exists in the world. And I mean that both in relationship to the world of life, politics, social economics, as well as the world of film, right? Like what movies are being made or have been made in the last few years that live in the same world. And those are both kind of broad concepts, but I think it's crucial that that filmmakers do that work, do that research, because you don't exist in a vacuum, right? Cinema is not a painting, cinema is not sculpture. They exist so much more in relationship to everything around them. So I think that's something that I think is very important in terms of like, it's not necessarily commerciability, but it means that you're aware of its relationship to the world. I mean, even making Span Night when we did and making Span Night today would be such a different process because of the films that have come in the years in between. So that is, I think, the first thing. But then the second thing is that kind of once you've done that work, I think you actually, the beauty of first features is that you can be free from all of that. Like that doesn't really make that much of a difference unless you have a first feature that wants, $5 million, which best of luck. But, if you're working within a more reasonable first feature budget, I actually think that the best, for me at least, the best first features are the ones that are brave. So those elements can add a little bit, but maybe you guys would argue differently.
No,
I don't think they make that much of a difference, really.
And I think that and Nick kind of tapped on this as well, is you have to create your own momentum, and excitement comes in all different forms. I think that people are, unfortunately, the people thinking that certain names mean certain things, it's really a small pool in a big film world where you're playing with that game, like he said, like Bruce Willis and Nicolas Cage and Tom Cruise and people like that. That's one thing, but when you get down to it, it's about creating the most exciting package for your film, and it's not necessarily going to pre-sell your film, because a lot of these people, even if they're an Academy Award nominee or a winner, might not have the value to pre-sell it around the world, but you're creating a package that excites investors, that they think if you do a good job on this will return on the other end in some capacity. And a return looks like a lot of different things. A return's not just, for every investor, a return's not just making every dollar back. You know what I mean? It might be a belief in the message. It might be them pushing cash out given year for any given reason. It might be a belief in you, so that, while your first two features, maybe do amazing work and make a splash, the belief that by your third feature, you'll get Tom Hanks or something like that. So, everybody does things for different reasons.
Yeah, I want to say a little something about budget too and how it relates to this creatively. When I was putting together my first feature, my producer and I sat down and we said, okay, what is the bare minimum that we could make this for, and it still be basically the script? Like, we'd have to make some changes, and then what is our optimal budget, right? And so that really inspired us in terms of financing, raising money, because we thought, okay, and we're talking like low budget, like really, you know, there's a proportional thing between how commercial your movie is and what it really is, that's directly related to the budget. So it's a big difference if you think you can make your movie for $200,000 versus $2 million. Like that's gonna matter. I was sort of very, you know, when I made my first feature, it was right at the birth of the whole kind of mumblecore thing, which was a group of young filmmakers making really micro budget movies for the first time, really inspired by kind of new digital technology. For the first time, you could lift up a little camera and make a movie for $50,000. These are people like Andrew Bujalski and Joe Swanberg and Greta Gerwig and Lynn Shelton and the Duplass brothers. And I remember watching this movie called The Puffy Chair, which was a movie by the Duplass brothers, their first film. It got into Sundance. It was made, I think its budget was 40,000, 30,000, somewhere in that range. And I was like, I can conceive that amount of money. I can imagine actually raising that amount. Now, that means your movie's gonna look a certain way, and The Puffy Chair looks a certain way. But it has got heart and charm and a great story and good performances, and it got into Sundance and it got a distribution deal. And I was so inspired by it, I reached out to Mark Duplass to kind of just pick his brain about it. And then he read my script, loved it, and ended up playing the lead in my first feature. So there's that sort of weird kind of connection thing that can happen. But it started with being inspired by, can I make a movie for the bare minimum? Like, yeah, a $200,000 movie is not going to look like a $2 million movie, but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe if the story's good enough, if the performances are good enough, that's all I need, you know? And if you start going down that fundraising path, maybe you'll get to that $200,000 and still have like 6 months before shooting. Like, keep them trying to earn more and get to that more optimal budget. But really be thinking about, like, what's the minimum amount we can make this movie for?
I think that also too is like, you have to surround yourself with good producers and good collaborators. Like, wherever you are, if you're in Chicago, London, wherever, like, you better find out those people that can help you make that movie. Like, film is not a solo art. It's not, you're not painting a painting. You need people to help you get to that place. And so the more you're plugged into your community, your film community, wherever you are, you know, the better opportunity. Like you said, like, you might have another film shooting that you can go gaff, or you can go do this, and like, you can be part of that and hold different, be a part of that community, so that when your time is up, those people will be there and show up for you and do the jobs that you need to make that movie at the budget, at the tiny budget. And then maybe if you get a little bit more money, you hire other people that make it a bigger canvas, right? But being plugged in and having, you know, a lot of communication with your community, I think, is super important. Also, I just want to say too, like, know what's out there these days. Like, you know, they're like, the movies have changed, right? And like, there's some really interesting data points in just this COVID world. You know, one being like, for example, there's a couple movies that were like straight up, you know, very good, no cast genre movies. One movie was called The Wretched, and this movie is at like $1.5 million box office in the United States off of drive-ins, right? So like, now you have to understand, like, it's not even the same as it was before. We're having a film festival now. We're not even at Palm Springs, you know, talking about this. And so how is that going to change movies? You know, right now, nobody's making movies for the last 3 months. And so, like, I guess you could make a quarantine movie, right? Maybe that's your path. But you know, also just thinking about like, what is out there now? What are people watching? Where do people go for the movies for? You know, I think, you know, I always say this, and this is sort of like a, you know, and forgive me if one of you have made a film like this, but if you have like a family drama about like your you know, your family growing up in like Kern County, Missouri, you know, it's going to be a smaller, you know, the world is much more smaller now. And sometimes these stories, even though they might be hit at your personal core, I think people are looking for a bigger canvas these days too. And that's not to say you shouldn't go make your personal movie, but I think you just need to have a real cognizance of like, what are people watching out there? How do I get access to that? And how do I get my movie into that ecosystem so that, the world at large can enjoy it? Because you're not just making movies now for your local cinema, you're making movies that can be sold to a worldwide platform and be instantaneously watched by everybody. So I think just having that world review, and maybe that's just my philosophy, but I think it's important to keep that out there too, that like, we're not just making movies for your local cinema. You should be too. You should be telling your stories, but knowing that its access is worldwide now.
I want to just jump in for a second, kind of to say the opposite, but I feel like
Please.
I feel like the beauty, one of the privileges of making a first feature, a lot of people see making a first feature as sort of a daunting thing, a daunting first step. But I feel like in a way, making your first feature is one of the few times in your career when you can actually be free from thinking about any of this. And I mean, I'm gonna not, a lot, of course, you need to find money, you need to figure out how to put your cast together, you need to do everything that needs to happen in order to actually make the movie. But, to be very honest, how many first features make money in terms of distribution? I even if you go to Sundance, if you go it's just not a market that supports first features in on the distributions and sales side of things. I think it's very rare for first features, and maybe you guys have a different experience, but like in my experience is that it's very rare for a first feature to make money. Maybe you recoup your budget, which is great, but like to be widely successful, I mean, we read case studies, and those are case studies for a reason. There is a handful of movies that do that, and then there is a lot more movies that are being made that don't do that. So in a way, I think like you can kind of flip it around and see that as an opportunity where like you are free from a lot of these industry concerns that will increasingly become more present in your career as you move forward, right? Like you make your second feature, you make your third feature, all of a sudden, I mean, if you're at your third, fourth, fifth feature and none of your movies have made money, it's gonna become really difficult for a producer to go to Nick, to go to anyone out there and be like, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna be a big commercial success. And they're like, yeah, based on the previous number, like then it becomes statistic, right?
Right.
When you're making your first feature, there is no reference point. So I think it's kind of on the flip side, it's like one of the beauties of first features is that if you can work with that bare bones budget, then you can set yourself free from having these concerns with cast, with sales, with who, like you can really make the movie you want to make and, trust that there will be an audience for it if the story speaks, even as specific as it may be, speaks to universal themes, right? Which is, I think, a big challenge, but I think is, it's kind of the beauty of it.
And if I can even build a bridge between what Julia is saying and what Nick is saying, it is really proportional to the amount of money you want to tell your story. Yeah. We should all be so inspired by Sean Baker's movie Tangerine. I don't know if
Incredible movie.
Have seen that. An incredible movie shot on an iPhone, budget around 50,000 to 100,000. I'm not sure. About two trans women going about their day. And it is so alive and so funny and wild and well made and visionary. It's incredible. And that is just a product of pure vision. That's kind of what Julia is saying. It wasn't his first feature, but it might as well have been an electrifying first feature. And that's something like that clarity of vision is something you can be aiming for and not be thinking about movie stars. It was all unknowns in this movie, not be thinking about it is a niche film. It's not going to appeal to everyone's audience, but also not expensive to make, shot on an iPhone and looked great, by the way. Now, the second you start saying my vision will require at least a $4 million budget, there's just no, then you better be thinking about what Nick's talking about, because a movie is a popular art. It needs an audience. And so enough people need to watch this movie and connect to the story to justify that $4 million budget. And that's when you're going to start, that's when you're going to need to be taking into account actors and genre and things that drive budgets like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Tangerine's a great example, because Tangerine shows you that like the vision itself transcends the budget, and that like it's so unique, and it's such a, that thing about Tangerine, Craig, and I'm sure you agree, I had never seen a movie like that before in terms of its vision, right? Like nothing. So like that I think that's sort of my distinction. I apologize for ragging on the like personal family drama from your hometown. I apologize. Maybe that's just my own issues with those type of movies. But I think that example kind of bridges the gap there, right? Like you can be free, and you're absolutely right as a first-time filmmaker, whether that's your first feature or second feature. But that's the kind of vision and passion and momentum you got to be thinking about your story. It's got to be like that is such a great example. And again, like, and I think another point is really important too. Like the one issue I have, is from my point of view, is like, yeah, when people come to me and they are for something, and like I gotta have $5 million. I can't make my vision unless I have $5 million. And then I'm just like, well, that's where you end. You're like I end and you begin, because it's like I can't jam visions into like neat packages to serve up to people like a platter at a restaurant, right? Like, I think having filmmakers understand the complexities of this and being able to like Craig with yours, like having a budget that is the bare bones, and then having like, hey, maybe somebody wants to, or maybe an actor sees this or whatever, and then having those optionalities where you can go down and dirty, and then if somehow you're lucky, you've got a little bit more padding, I think is smart, and it shows that you're thinking different scenarios and every different permutation of how to make this movie. And I think as a filmmaker, you have to pivot and be agile in terms of what is given to you.
No, for sure. There's absolutely two ways to make a movie. It's like we budgeted it out and it's like, this is what this movie costs to make. Or two, we have this much money. Can we make this movie for that amount of money? Yeah. And a lot of times you're in the latter situation. There's certain things that you can't skimp on, and then there's a lot of things that are all relative. So
I just want to jump in with one last question before we hop over to the Q&As, or the questions from the attendees. So just to connect this, because we talked a lot about production, and some of you have touched on the importance of identifying the audience and understanding how it's going to be received. At what point, especially with first-time filmmakers, are you discussing distribution and distribution pathways and what that looks like?
I mean, I'll jump in here because this is my specialty. The day that you wrap production, you should be talking about it. The day of, if you're smart. Now that's obviously a lofty goal for Craig and for Julia and for Andrew. They're like, we just made our movie. Well, I don't give a shit. Like we did it, And like obviously for filmmakers and producers, next is post-production, which is you can make a whole different movie in post, right? But for me personally, it's like once the film's in the can, you should be thinking about, especially now too. It's like, what is the future of film festivals? What is the future of theatrical? These are things that right now it is an explosive moment in the business, and things are changing so rapidly, and we have no idea what the future of cinema is. Literally, Chris Nolan may or may not save cinema July 31st. So we'll find out, at least here in America. So like, and I'm serious, like, by the way, I'm actually serious when I say that, because every single movie is going to trail off what happens with Tenet in America and what happens with the money. So for me, you should be talking about it, and it's okay to not know, but I do think there are important things like withoutabox.com online that can get you regional festivals, film festivals.
Which actually Without a Box is no more now.
Is it really? What do they use now?
Film Freeway.
Oh, Film Freeway.
Yeah.
Those tools are important. Sorry, I'm so out of touch. Obviously, I need to update my assistant. I'm like so out of touch.
New development. It's a new development.
It needs the bottom line is you just need to you need to have that business cap too. Like I think the hardest thing is it's hard for filmmakers because you're all artists to think about like, what do I do once my piece of art is done, you know? And there's not always gonna be agents there that are just gonna like pluck you off from the sidewalk and be like, don't worry, I've got you, let's go. And so thinking about that ahead of time, talking to your producer, you know, having a sense of what festivals there are, having a sense of where your film fits in the ecosystem, right? But for me, it's like you start right after you wrap picture. And I know that sounds crazy, but for me, that's when I would get started.
I think so with Columbus, we ended up doing creative distribution in North America, which was a very interesting process. But I actually would argue, again, because first features or small budget features give you a lot of freedom, I would argue you want to start even earlier than that. I mean, I feel like with a lot of very small films, like we're talking about under $1 million, you can start thinking about distribution even before, even as part of your financing. And I think, you know, I mean, distribution is bound to keep unraveling until, you know, something like one way or another, it's going to have to change. Because right now it's a very uneven and very, like there is huge gaps in distribution, right? In the distribution system as is, both in terms of serving different platforms, serving different audiences, and serving different films. So I feel actually you want to start even before and like really think about who is going to want to watch your film. And like, if the answer is art house film lovers, you may want to dig a little deeper, because I feel like that's the constant. That's what we write for every possible. It's like art house film lovers. That doesn't quite cut it. You need to really do a lot of soul searching of like, but really, and ask people, ask around, like, would you watch? I asked my sister who's 13, I text her and I'm like, do you like this new Netflix thing? Why do you like it? How, you know, like kind of ask people what they like and they watch. And more than that, how do they watch films? Because huge gap in how people experience films, whether you're making a film for a 16, 20, 25-year-old, myself, you know, like a 35-year-old mom, or my mother. Like, I think you need to become very aware that people experience movies in hugely different ways. And so you need to think about that beforehand and sort of build a story around your film that fits the arc you see ahead of it. And those stories come from anywhere, you know, like someone who was huge on YouTube and ended up being on your film, first acting experience and huge, they come with a huge following. Like all of that stuff is so relative. So you really need to do it for your film very early on, I would say.
Just being conscious of time here, I want to get in some questions from the attendees. So one question here, if I personally know a high net worth individual, how would you suggest floating the idea to them to help finance my first feature?
Well, I can say that what has changed between now and 2007, when I did my first feature, is basically just the method of reaching out to somebody, i.e. we made a hard copy physical prospectus, which was basically a booklet that was actually pretty like cool and colorful and visual and kind of was all about the creative elements of the movie. This is for investors. Just to kind of pull them in. Like if somebody is looking to invest in a film, it likely a high net worth individual, it'll likely be because they made their money, you know, in, I don't know, office furniture or whatever. And they're looking for something more fun. So you might think that you want to hit them with like, he's a business guy, so we're going to do all the numbers first. It's like, no, no, no. They want to have something fun and sexy and creative. So put together a prospectus, which is what's called a lookbook. You know, some visual representation of your movie that pulls people in. That is all about the creative, the storytelling, your director's vision, summary of what the movie is. Here's some really cool images. Maybe you know, this will probably be online, you know, digital these days. So there could be a video element of it, you know, whether it's your short film or what's called a rip reel, which are like scenes pulled from other movies that kind of reflect the vision of how you see this. And then at the very end, a page or two about, here is our financial plan, here's more of the statistics, more of that kind of stuff. Here's how you get a return on your investment. It's always good to be honest. I think it's always good to tell investors up front that there's a good, you know, many first features do not make their money back. But here are the different ways to make your money back. Here are the different scenarios where you might, and then hit them with that, you know. If you know personally a high net worth individual, like when I did not, when I was making my first feature, I just didn't know anybody in that realm. My producer did. I think there was a more of a personal appeal. I think I think maybe they went out for a drink and hung out and caught up, shot the shit, and then ended with like, would you be interested in looking at my digital prospectus, and or like end the conversation that way? It's like a Mad Men business meeting kind of vibe, you know. That might be a way to approach them, but you need that prospectus.
And I don't think over promising does anybody any favors. It's like, don't give them every reason not to invest, of course. Like, you want to still present and try to close a deal, but like, be realistic. And the bottom line is like, investing in the arts, in any type of arts, is a risky investment. It's not like you're investing in a traditional stock portfolio or something like that. It's a risky investment, but it pays off in many different folds. You know what I mean? And if you're talking with a high net worth individual that like knows how to manage their own personal wealth, that can look like a lot of different things. So, but I think you find the ways that's most enticing to them. And sometimes what's most enticing to a high net worth individual that's not directly involved in entertainment, maybe naturally, is not just, you know, is not just making their money back, but maybe it's like getting to be a part of the experience. Like, entertainment is one industry, as we've seen, especially during quarantine and stuff, that is a really unifying thing that brings like, it does not matter what you do, you watch movies and television, you know, as something that brings everybody together and that everybody enjoys. So it might just be their foray into this thing. It might be the equivalent of wanting to go to the premiere, wanting to do a set visit, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think if you know someone, just kind of thinking about what may be exciting to them, like, is it going to Sundance for the premiere? Is it, you know, going to Cannes? Is it meeting an actor? Is it, do a set visit? Is it because they believe in the cause? You know, is a lot of, especially in the US, a lot of, you know, very rich people do put money towards causes that they believe in. So I think it's, whether it's the glamour, the cause, like, each person will have the thing that sort of triggers them. And honestly, a lot of them are much smarter business people than we will ever be. And so they're like, yeah, I get it. It's a losing business. I mean, they get it from the get-go.
And I will say, for a first feature, do look outside the entertainment industry. That's where like, you're going to find somebody that really does believe in you, that's not being hit up with every opportunity that is flashier than yours, you know, on a daily basis.
Totally.
All extremely great advice. Here's another one from an anonymous attendee. Is it better to secure cast first to get the financing, or to finance first to make sure you have everything in place before you get the cast.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we're talking first-time filmmakers, right? You're probably not in a position where you're going to call CAA and say, hey, I have never made a film, but I'd really like it if Elle Fanning is in my movie. You're just never going to get in the door. You know, agents' primary job is to protect their client, and I think it's just hard to assume that, you know, unless there's some personal connection there or there is some sort of momentum. Let's say you had a short in Sundance, boom, there's that sort of hook they can explain their client to. Look, you're making films, it's first time feature, and I think everyone, Julia, Craig, and Andrew can speak much better than me, but make the feature with the best available people in front of you. You know, simple as that.
I couldn't agree more. I remember when we were in pre-production for my first feature for True Adolescence, it starred Mark Duplass. This kind of, you know, name producer caught wind of the project, read the script, loved it. I remember calling me up like 2 weeks before shooting, it was like, I love this, man. The script is so great. I want to be a part of this. And this producer kind of meant something. He was like, but who is this Mark Duplass guy? You guys need to shut down pre-production and we need to go for Paul Rudd. I'm telling you, we got to go for Paul Rudd. And I'm like, yeah, at first I'm kind of dazzled, like Paul Rudd. Like at the time, you know, he was like in everything and he was right for the role and this and the other thing. And for 2 seconds I was like, oh, maybe we should. And then I was like, wait, what? First of all, Paul Rudd is not going to do this movie. I mean, this is a producer trying to get in on something, and
we're going to go ahead and need a name on this producer before you can.
Yeah, we want to know who this hero is.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long just to go like, wow, no. We have the perfect actor for this movie at this budget. It is a bird in hand. We are making the right decision, and we made the right. I have never regretted that decision, even for a second.
I met with someone recently who told me something about cast, and I know not all financiers and not all companies will think this way, but they were saying something that helped me put a lot of this casting, financing, what comes first, chicken and egg thing. They were like, you know, honestly, like under 5 million, more than like the name of the cast. What matters is the story around the person you cast. So it may be someone who's not as well known, but they have been doing a whole bunch of things. And then all of a sudden, you know, this is their breakthrough. Like there are so many different ways of thinking about what a meaningful cast is that go beyond like, you know, international sales projections. And I feel like that, you know, that's becoming more true every day with the new distribution ways that there are. So I feel like in this stage, you sort of don't want to do that. Like you don't want to go down that rabbit hole because like Nick is saying, you probably won't have the support of the people who are doing this, like all the agents who can actually put you in touch with people. So find who's right for you. And if that person is early on in the process, by all means, but I don't think the two things are as connected as we're made to believe they are at this stage in careers.
I think we have time for just maybe one more question. Let me look here. Okay, so from Sophia, there is an idea amongst short filmmakers that when they make a first feature, life will be easier, and making more films after that is just a matter of time. I wanted to ask your advice. Yeah.
I'll let the filmmakers answer this.
Okay. I'll just. So I made my first feature called True Adolescence. We premiered at South by Southwest. It was pretty well received. The reviews were pretty good. It was a critics pick in the New York. It got a little distribution deal, which was like a week in theaters in New York and LA, and then onto DVD was still a thing then. I thought that was okay. It didn't set the world on fire, but it made its mark roll out the red carpet, and I'm going to be making my second film within weeks. 4 years it took to get the second feature off the ground for many different reasons, right? I mean, for reasons that I was trying to do something a little more ambitious. You know, the fact that my first feature, while solid, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't Pi by Darren Aronofsky, let's say, and very few movies are. You know, it's very easy to get dazzled by those massive success Sundance stories of like some kid made his first feature, and that those are so the exception to the rule that I mean, it's just like 0.01% of
unicorn.
Yeah. Most first features, you're lucky if it's even watchable. And then there's another wave of like, okay, that's pretty good. My first feature was essentially like a good short film. It was like a calling card for me. I stand by the movie. I love the movie, but it's not like instantly I was able to then I had to fight for that second film. But I will say this, like, my second film is this movie, The Skeleton Twins, and we knew that there were good roles for actors in it, and I thought we could get financing through actors this time. We approached a casting director, a big one, Avi Kaufman, who really liked my first feature. And also Mark Duplass had become a friend of mine because he was in my first feature. So Avi was like, she loved the script, The Skeleton Twins. She liked my first feature a lot. She was like, yeah, let's try to get this little film off the ground. She ended up, you know, being instrumental into getting Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig into The Skeleton Twins. They agreed to do the movie partially because they didn't know who I was. They watched my first feature and they're like, this isn't half bad, right? So this is to say, if you make your first feature, you work on that second one, but it will take longer than you think. Work hard. There's timing, there's circumstance. It will happen. It'll take longer than you think.
Any last little pieces of advice for these filmmakers as they're going into making their first feature?
Don't lose heart. It's going to be a long road. You know, you're going to have victories and failures, and embrace your failures. It's going to be okay.
And I think, as we had said, Nick had said, and everybody's kind of alluded, there's not one path to the first feature. You know, there's a million different ways that anything can come together. And actors are not just instrumental in like the dollar signs they bring overseas or in securing a North American deal. They're instrumental in the excitement they bring to people. They're instrumental in the other actors they know and that they can attract to a project. They're instrumental creatively. So I would say don't underestimate, and that's such a great example of Mark Duplass. Mark is such a hybrid of so many different things, but the amount of actors that I've worked with, I mean, my very first film, my lead actor was Adam Brody, but like he was so crucial to the actresses signing on board because of who he had relationships with and people being excited to work with him. That's a large reason it got made too.
I would say be brave and be humble. And I will also say that it's not always the flashy people who look like they're up here that are the ones who get your movies made. Oftentimes it's the peers that grow with you, and don't ever underestimate that, because, you know, the person who now you're like, yeah, but they're not experienced enough. In 2 years, they may be, you know, winning an Oscar for a short, they may be winning an Independent Spirit Award, whatever it is. So don't ever, pick the best collaborators. Don't look at the shiny object.
Amen.
Craig, anything else from you?
Work hard with some, if you're talented, and that's not up to anybody here, that's up to the gods. If you have a little bit, you don't even need to be really talented. If you have a little bit of talent, but you work your ass off with timing and circumstance, it will happen. It'll take longer than you think.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much. This was a really great hour, a really great way to wake up on a Thursday morning. For, I think, all of us on this panel are in LA, so I appreciate the early morning chat. to all the attendees, thank you for coming. We have much more forum programming the rest of the festival, so please check that out and sign up. And I just want to really thank the panelists here for giving us some of their time when it is so valuable right now.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can
Yeah.
I say another last thing?
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about general big cinema questions. I think, because of the times we're in, as filmmakers, you all have a huge responsibility to make the change that you think, you claim, you say you want in the world. So use film to make that change. Like, don't be shy and don't think about casting. Think about the message that you want to put out into the world.
It's very powerful, and it can work.
That was a really great note to end on.
Go team.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good
Bye.
one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.